Hi, my name is Gilbert Vicario. I'm Chief Curator at Perez Art Museum, Miami. I'm here with my co-curators of Xican-a.o.x Body, Marissa Del Toro and Cecilia Fajardo-Hill. So Cecilia, when you and I met, I became very excited about this project, and we talked about the ways in which Chicano art has been presented. So I realized that there was a lot of multiple conversations that are going on within the exhibition. The show is broken up into 7 or 8 sections, but also there's an interesting dialogue happening intergenerationally. And I think for me, it was very exciting because we're able to present a new generation of visitors and viewers, art that was produced over 50, 60 years ago that are as relevant today and to the younger generation of artists in the exhibition.
Yeah, agreed. And also, I feel that that's why we also have an intergenerational curatorial team. I mean, Marisa is the youngest of the team. I'm the oldest of the team. I am what Patsy Valdez defines as Latina cosmopolitan because I'm not a Chicana. Though I have to say that the reason why I love Chicanx art so much, I mean, I have many reasons, but one of the things that I identify the most is that Chicanx people and Latinx people in general have been considered for so long almost like illegitimate citizens or forever immigrant, no matter how many generations you are. And I'm an immigrant myself from South America. And I was completely ignored how over decades Chicanx people have created a sense of community, culture, have been activists. And they have created a sense of place. And I thought, that they gave me sort of a permission to create my own sense of place in the US. So I really feel that we need to pay homage to that brilliance, political, social, and artistic. And I think, yeah, and for me to work with a team like you, I mean, it's been so interesting because it couldn't have been otherwise.
Yeah.
No?
Well, I'm actually, I'm first generation Mexican American Chicano. And so obviously it's something that I've carried with me my whole life. So it was an opportunity to really kind of look at the material through the filter of my own identity, which I think is
What about
important.
you?
Yeah, Marissa, I was going to ask you, like, what?
Yeah.
So my question to you,
Yeah,
Marissa, is what was it about the exhibition that got you excited?
I mean, the opportunity to curate with both of you, was an amazing opportunity and excited me, but also just the topic in itself because it was Chicanx art, Chicana art, but not just in the traditional, like, categorical definition that's been placed on Chicanx art. It was pushing the boundaries. It was looking at the body as a radical form that, through experimental conceptual means to discuss a host of topics in the exhibition, like there's like 8 sections and there could be more,
Right.
but, ranging from political push to, intergenerational communities, other forms of community, queer community, different forms of femininity, queerness, just identity itself, but also about like the radicalness of resistance, and reteaching and like sharing that history. So that's what really excited me about the opportunity to present Chicanx art in this form, in this way, because I remember we were sitting in the library many times, like at Phoenix Art Museum, and like going through the books and the catalogs and seeing how many small exhibitions have focused on just Chicano art, but usually in a very traditional sense of like very, how would you say it? Like, it was very categorical, I would say. It wasn't pushing boundaries. So I think for me, that was like the most exciting part to be part of this project. And also as like a 3rd, 4th generation Chicana, like being able to work on this art, to finally see myself in the art in the museum, which had been a goal of mine since I was like, a young teenager going to MOLA and the only thing I could equate myself was to a Oswaldo Guayasamín, because like, you know, the brownest figure.
That's really interesting because Kerry James Marshall, that was one of his inspirations, was going through the museum and asking him that question: why don't I see myself?
Yeah.
How do you know? I don't ever see myself represented other than in these very stereotypical ways.
Yeah. And like, you know, that was a Latin American artist. So I didn't see Chicanx art in museums, not until like, I think, you know, years later. You know, we've had so many, like a few actually, but few and far between, you know. And I think for me, it was just pivotal. And then, you know, getting the chance to premiere the show in Riverside and my hometown.
In your hometown.
Yeah.
That was incredible. So I'll pick up on the thread, you know, sticking to the idea around the body. Cecilia, I wonder, one of the things that really sold me on the exhibition was when you said to me, the way that this exhibition will differentiate itself from other exhibitions on Chicano art is the emphasis on conceptual and performance-based photography, which I think is one of the most exciting and strongest themes that run, or undercurrents that run through the exhibition. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, performance art, and when someone turns their camera towards themselves, is a very, very radical gesture, especially when you, as a person, as a body, have been completely erased from being a dignified portrait, being someone perceived to be complex. And the reality is, in the history of Chicanx art, I mean, starting with ASCO, you know, but also not just photography and performance art itself, but also in paintings and in different medias, like think of Malcasas. The fact is that something that has not been perceived as a strength of Chicanx art or Latinx art, which is conceptual sophistication, this sort of really dense, complex, engaging, like beautiful, powerful form of expression, it has not been sort of decided that, you know, no, you belong to that. And those are the sort of holes in, I'm an art historian, so for me, the holes in art history are like, what happens when you write the history of conceptual art and photography and you erase completely from the face of the earth artists like the ones we have in the exhibition?
Right.
It's just, and the thing is, and it's not just art, because all this art was born actually embedded into society, into the real world. The definition, the border between life and art was very much erased. So by bringing them back into the center, inspiring people, and also, as Marissa says, I see myself in them. I'm one of them, you know?
Yeah.
So instead of always saying that you are a foreign, actually has a transformative effect in society. And we know that one of the biggest issues about the body with Latinx and Chicanx people, that they've been perceived as humans that are just there to serve a purpose, like collecting grapes or doing things like this, but that is not valued as a human that has a culture, that whatever. And so that's why the body needed to be at the center, not only because the art is powerful, but because socially we should not be erasing the humanity and the brilliance of these people. You should not say, I only pick this little part of you, the one that is useful to me. You can be my maid, or you can be this and that. I don't think that is acceptable anymore. We are in the 21st century, and this is not the thing that should be happening in museums.
Yeah.
That makes me think of Jalen Gomez, you know, and like how she highlights those figures beautifully in her works, you know, the figure of the maid, the pool cleaner, like the overlooked characters that are in our lives every day, but yet we disregard because, you know, of classism, you know, xenophobia, whatever it may be, just racism. But I think that's like, for me, was very important, like for this exhibition to highlight like how, you know, Chicanx communities see those positions, because we are those positions, but we like show the power within those positions too, you know? And like, it goes back to like, but still raising awareness about like the issues that affect them, like Esther Hernandez's Sun Mad, you know, and how it affected her. And that's the reason why, you know, she was commenting on the pollution, the water pollution in her town, and how the farm and cultural landscape out there was like affecting her.
Yeah. And really ahead of her time. You know, I think now we're beginning to understand that these are things that touch everyone. It's not just something that happens out there. It's not just something out in the West Coast.
But
That all
also,
of these
yeah,
things
but also
impact.
now we think, oh, the environment is terrible. We polluted it with whatever. But then she's also saying it's not just the earth that is polluted. You've also, in on the way,
Mhm.
hurt a lot of people
Right.
that were actually in contact with this. And then you have this intergenerational dialogue between someone like Judy Hernandez, and then you have Narciso Martinez, the sculpture that receives you as you enter the gallery, of a worker in the field, like it
Right.
was when you came and moved into this country from Mexico.
Yeah.
You know, these are the people that during the pandemic have fed our tables, have actually put the body
Yeah.
out there for us, and then we need to cherish them, you know, we need to appreciate them. We need to, instead of ignoring that they exist, and it's like, yeah, thank you, you know?
No, I think it's really, that's what, for me, one of the most powerful moments in the exhibition, because it really makes it visible. How does food get from the farm to your table? And who is doing that? And, you know, I'm excited about Chicano-a.o.x body being presented in Miami and in the state of Florida, because we're the second largest agricultural industry after California. So there's an undercurrent of relevancy even to that conversation, which I'm very excited about in talking and highlighting more. The other thing, when you were mentioning Esther Hernandez, the idea of pop art is another example of invisibility. There's been a lot of interesting exhibitions that have focused on Latin American artists who worked in pop art. But of course, Chicano artists are rarely part of that conversation. So
Also, African Americans.
African American,
There's been a
Asian
huge
American.
pop art,
Yeah.
which is in your essay. You talk about this
Mhm.
sort of confluence of these three, sectors of the art world,
Mhm.
which are not part of a conversation that is very unique.
Exactly, exactly. So I think that, you know, that is, I think, clearly illustrated in the exhibition, but really kind of sets the stage for other conversations. Social justice is another theme that sort of runs throughout the exhibition. Social justice, social space, and the exhibition, you know, does highlight a lot of the injustices that have faced the Chicano community, but there's also a lot of joy and celebration in the exhibition.
Yeah, I think we really need to highlight this. What is the reason why you would denounce something extremely traumatic or painful in your history, in your own life? Ultimately, it's because you want that to be revealed, because, you know, when you are a victim of an injustice or generational injustice, then that comes and you comes to terms with it, and it's recognized, it's acknowledged, and then you move on. But also at the same time, the purpose for it is to continue living, is to say this should not continue to happen, and we need to celebrate life. And so, you know, there is so much in the exhibition. For example, lowrider sculpture with, you know, the gypsy rose made as a piñata car, or, you know, Liz Cohen dedicated all the energy turning a travertino into lowriders and all that. So there has been so much in Chicanx culture that has to do with that. And I think, you know, also queer culture. Queer culture is one of the most lively and beautiful forms of being that we can see reflected in art through this exhibition. And I don't know, I mean, Marissa, maybe you want to talk a little bit about this, because I think, you know, you contributed a lot of, you know, insight to a lot of younger generation of artists that are working intersectionally.
Yeah. Jose Villalobos, I think, is a prime one. And I think his work is very impactful. It talks about, like you're saying, like the harm, you know, it recognizes that harm, but also like highlights like the harmness of like toxic masculinity. He also highlights beautifully about how in like norteño, ranchero culture, there is an inherent queerness involved, like in the fringes of, you know, the vaqueros t-shirt, the hats, like the boots that are beautifully, you know, embossed with like leather and like just, it's just, I think it's impactful for Jose's work to be part of this conversation and showing that, you know, queerness is okay. And I think there is a shift happening within the Chicanx community between queerness and identity becoming more accepted than it has in previous generations. But I want to, you know, give that to like Teddy Sandoval, who was one of like the pivotal like veteranos who paved that way for us to be queer and like, you know, be proud of who we are. Rafa Esparza's
Yes.
Corporal Rampla, which is amazing. And I think that speaks to a lot of what this exhibition is about, the brown body being also infused with the lowrider and how the lowrider is a marker of Chicanx identity. Like, you know, it's West Coast, but it's also everywhere. There's lowriders across the country. They're in Dallas, they're in Chicago, you know, they're probably here in Miami too.
Yeah, they're in
Oh,
Miami
absolutely.
too.
So it's just,
Yeah.
you know, showing the transformation of that history, but you know, how the lowrider is joy, you know, Sunday cruising, like that's the opportunity to like get through the city, have the best day you can with your family or friends, you know, and just enjoy life, even though you have all this angst and at times hardships going on around you. But I think that was like the cornerstone, the lowrider being a cornerstone of this exhibition, you know, being about how like our bodies, the brown body is often seen as a mechanical object of labor, but also it's a beautiful object that is adorned with chrome and glitter paint, you know, and we should be celebrating that.
Yeah. Well, it's also this idea, I mean, it's also very political in a sense that it occupies social space. The lowrider, you know, it's a way of saying we're here, we need to be seen, which is something that we spoke a lot about in terms of incorporating that in the show.
I mean, there are aspects of the show like the lowriders. Lowriders, there was a time in the US where in LA, in Whitty Boulevard, they were forbidden from circulating. It was considered to be an American thing to do, to turn a powerful machine, a latest technology of a car, put a suspension that made it low, that made it dance, that, you know, you upholstered with like red velvet, fake flowers, Rosa Mexicanas dripping, so forth. So that it was like turning this, the most American symbol of, you know, the during the time of the Cold War, I guess, into this Chicanx machine that was also creating community, because you don't have the plaza, the square where you could socialize. You just circulate as a group, and then people will come into the street, stop the traffic. So it really was a way to create, occupy the city in a very political and beautiful way to make it your own. And then you have also like Judy Baca dressed as a pachuca. Pachucos were also considered to be, you know, using too much cloth for their suits, and, you know, the suits and so forth. And they were like, so there is lots of components in the exhibition that talk about things that socially we're actually not seen as something that should be happening. And here they are celebrated as something that is a historiography that actually conforms a line that allows for Chicanx people or Mexican American, however you identify yourself, as someone empowered, because it is this beautiful culture that came and was fought before us.
Well, you know what? It's so interesting what you're speaking about, because immediately I thought it's a real a violation of accepted dress codes. But I think one of the other kind of cool undercurrents in the exhibition is dress and fashion, and you can really see with Judy Baca dressing up as a pachuca, and then seeing examples by John Valadez, for example, of people that he would photograph during the 1970s and even up into the 80s with the work of Patsy Valdez. There's a very interesting way in which that has also embraced and also defines Chicano art in a certain way.
It's a type of glamour. That's why the catalog has this
Yes.
very, very beautiful flashy pink to talk about this kind of glamour that is
Exactly.
really not necessarily exaggerated, but is unique. And Patsy Valdez, who is in the cover of this catalog, really talked about that. She would say, I dare you to look at me and tell me in my face, I am not the woman that you think I am. My beauty is my own beauty,
Right.
is a Chicanx glamour.
Right.
And then she would do that with her friends. And I think it takes courage to say, I don't care what you think of me. I am doing this. And now we, in our own terms now, can say, wow, you can admire for the vitality and the real beauty that it has.
Right.
Because these were in the 70s and 60s and 80s, it was really hard to do this. But yeah.
I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the impact. So ASCO is also represented in the exhibition, and of course, they have really come to the center of our understanding of the history of conceptual art. They've gotten their rightful due after many years of really not really being properly understood within the history of contemporary art. And so I'm wondering for you how important that is in terms of their contribution.
I remember seeing the retrospective of ASCO at LACMA, I think it was 2010 or 11. It was extraordinary to see this. I thought it was an extraordinary exhibition. But what happens is that the art world has a way to say, okay, we're going to let you in through the gate. ASCO, you can come in, but nobody else comes in. So an exhibition like ours says, yeah, but look, there's all these other people there in the queue, and they don't necessarily have to conform in a very precise way an idea of conceptual art that is driven by performance and so forth. But I think they had a very important role. And at the time also, they were a little bit in tension with traditional Chicano art themselves. So there is all these different layers, but it is important that ASCO exists and that Patsy Valdez exists in her own terms, and then we have Gronk existing in his own terms. But the idea of an exhibition like this is that we can bring them all together, and it makes sense that there is ASCO, and then there is Judy Back, and then all these gestures. Celia Herrera Rodriguez, she's making this performance about this idea of how Indian I am, and this is not to talk about indigeneity. As a woman, as a mestiza woman, as a Chicana woman, would never be considered a conceptual gesture, because ASCO looked urban, looked glamorous and whatever. But what about someone like Celia Herrera? Is that conceptual? Is that part of performance? Yes, but the concept behind it is not what the Western canons considers to be a conceptual reason. No, then, and as that, many other things in the exhibition talk about something that it was not considered to be performance. It was not considered to be conceptual. It was not considered to be contemporary art or experimental. It's all a narrow art historical societal perspective. So ASCO, yes, but then so many other people, Yolanda Lopez, dressed as a Virgen de Guadalupe or whatever. And they were all doing this at the same time in the 1970s.
Well, also Miss Vaginal Davis, a pivotal figure of the punk movement, of just Chicanx punk identity, and performing as Cholita alongside Alice Bag, and really, I think also being ASCO ostracized at times for their identity, but also because they were not part of the traditional Chicano understanding of what a Chicano was that was connected to the 1960s moratorium. They were on the outskirts of that, and they were performing in drag and just being fabulous and rocking out on stage. And I think that has left a lineage for so many artists who are younger today, Rafa Esparza, Fabian, Jose Villalobos, Gabriela Ruiz.
People forget, the LA punk scene in the 80s was also something that Chicano artists of that generation
contributed. And also they did it with other people. They did it with people of different walks of life.
Exactly. So that actually, I'm thinking about the section in the show called Nepantla, the idea of in-betweenness, which again, it permeates throughout the exhibition and sort of interesting. And the more you think about it, you realize that this is such an important concept. Can you talk a little bit about Nepantla and the sort of,
Yeah.
for people who aren't familiar so much
Yeah.
with the term?
So it was coined by Gloria Asandua, a profound Chicana feminist writer scholar, and discusses Nepantla as this in-betweenness, this liminality, this existence in a in-between space in society, of being Mexican and American, but not being both or enough or for either side, and having to exist and continue to survive in the US. But, when you go back to Mexico, your Spanish sucks and you called pocha.
Pocho, they used to call me Pocho.
I get pocha, so,
Yeah.
and it's just about her. She really harnessed that, energy, I think, as a form of power for Chicanas and Chicanx members to utilize that, not to fight with it anymore, but to use it as part of their identity and understand that that is our gift, because we're able to transverse and go through many spaces that others can't, And I think in the exhibition, a lot of the art speaks to that concept of, having to exist within the US and like different forms of capitalism, but then also existing in at home, like, our traditional realities that, we love, but also kind of sometimes conflicts with what we want to enjoy,
Right.
like the punk music versus ranchero music and
The Smiths.
yes.
It's a good, yeah. But it's also kind of a form of code switching.
It is
because
code
that
switching.
was,
Is absolutely, yes.
Exactly.
But also, Gloria Saldúa has the notion of the Trojan horse, where she talks about normally, you are invited into a situation as a form of labor, but then when you're exercising the labor or you have an opportunity, then you transform what you touch, you rage a type of societal transformational without asking permission. And I feel if we were to define an ethos for Chicanx artists in general, I think is you don't ask for permission. They didn't ask for permission. Judy Barker didn't ask for permission. Oscar didn't ask for permission. So therefore, when you are not self-conscious, when you're not asking for something, you're not asking for the system to recognize you, you just go for it, you do it, is very powerful, because that has power. You are saying, I'm not taking into account the system. I'm just going to go for it because I have something to say. And I think that's strong.
Yeah. You know what I'm thinking also at this moment in the cultural landscape of the US, Chicano art there is a recognition that's happening right now. Many artists, some of them unfortunately who died prematurely, are being collected by major institutions in this country. And we can go, I don't have to name those institutions, but it's interesting that that's happening at this moment. But I wonder, I want to contemplate for a moment the idea of the art object and what it represents as a cultural record of our existence. And the fact that in a show like Xican-a.o.x Body, you have works that are of sculpture, you have videos, you have paintings, but in some cases there are artists that are being highlighted in the exhibition that the only thing that we can demonstrate of their existence is a piece of paper, some record that we were able to find. And I think for me that's one of the most beautiful aspects of the show, that we can actually have a beautiful painting or sculpture, but we can also have a photocopy of something that documented a performance in 1970 that really stands as the only record of an artist having worked or existed. And I'm thinking of Ciclona, for example. And I don't know, I know that this is something, Cecilia, that you're very this is something that I've learned from your curatorial
Well,
practice.
I believe that arts should not have hierarchies, and the art system should not reproduce them. So an artist is not more important than another one because he's more famous because as a white male or whatever, but also objects. You don't have to have, I mean, it sounds banal what I'm going to say. It doesn't have to be a polished bronze sculpture or a beautiful piece of technology to stand against this kind of ephemeral demonstration of something that was done with the means that they existed, like Ciclona. He went to the beach, he had a camera, took some shots, and then plastered them, glued them into a thing, and then wrote something about it. And that has so much power too. And I think in this exhibition, we didn't want to reproduce hierarchies of value. That's why it's not only intergenerational. Some artists in the exhibition at the moment are in vogue. Some artists have been forgotten, and they're all for us. They have the same importance, and they're presented with the same dignity. And I think the art in the show demands that from us. Yeah, that we remove whatever convention of the learned trade of curatorial practice as the exceptionalism of someone that is very famous, to just remove completely that idea.
Or a financial, or some sort of like, what is the value? Like, what are we really talking about? Does it matter that something is worth this amount of money? What's the cultural value, and how does that live in the cultural landscape of this country? So for me, that to me is one of the important lessons that I take away from an exhibition like this.
And it's funny because sometimes showing that piece of paper, the Xerox copy, that little photograph that was in an archive that you have to copy and get 10,000 permissions, is so much harder to get than a conventional piece of art. And you have to fight for it hard. And I think that's why sometimes in art history and the curatorial world, people don't make the effort with exhibitions such as this to sort of, to this kind of fine work of like considering that as relevant, and also worthy of labor.
Right.
And we're talking about the body, we're talking about our labor, the artist's labor, the labor of remembering and everything. And I believe strongly on those gestures. Because also our artists didn't believe in the market. They still don't believe in it.
Yeah.
Why then you're going to raise them because nobody wants to buy them as Sotheby's? I mean, I completely refuse to think that art should be limited to the market or to a canon.
Right. So, Marissa, what is one thing that you want the viewer to take away after seeing Xican-a.o.x body?
I think that there's no one way to define Chicanx, that there is a multiplicity of Chicanx identities, representation, forms, art, and that this show is just mainly about centering and showing how the brown body exists and is, for these artists, used as a form of political resistance and agent for, pushing against society, but also showing the joy and highlight of themselves too.
Yeah. Still
showing that, like Cecilia was mentioning, like that we're human. And I think that's the main takeaway I want to show, like that this art may not be in the canon of current art history books. I hope someday it is, but I hope that it is discussed in all the terms of its existence of experimental, conceptual, performative, photography, painting, art, in addition to it being Chicanx and Mexican American.
Yeah. I think for me...
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Yes.
No, go ahead, and then I will ask you a question.
Oh, well, what I was going to say is I think that for me, I want people to understand that this exhibition, I want people to understand how it can be relevant to their lives, how it connects, no matter where they come from, and that what we're proposing is adding to a national conversation about Latino art and culture, and really changing the way that we think of ourselves and what we think of as being Americans.
Absolutely.
I completely agree with you. And I wanted to actually ask you, Gilbert, because you said before that you're a first generation Mexican American, and then here you are, the chief curator of PALM, a Miami institution. And, you know, so why did you want to bring this exhibition to PALM, knowing that there is this, this kind of gap between the East Coast Latinx and the, well, we know that Chicanx art is everywhere, but it's perceived to be as a West Coast, Southwest thing. So why did you think it was important to bring it, and how, you know, so, and
That's a great
you
question.
as a person that is, because, you know, you are a chief curator, you bring an exhibition to this institution.
Well, it
So it
started,
represents you.
yeah, no, well, it started with that idea of, like, you know, PAM, at the core of its mission is to highlight Black diaspora, Latin American, and Latino artists. And so I've always felt the reason for coming to PAM is to really continue that conversation, to accelerate it and amplify it in the best way possible. And I really believe that Xican-a.o.x body does that. It really does add to the national conversation around Latinx issues, to put it more broadly. A lot of people questioned why an exhibition of Chicano artists in a community that's dominated by Caribbean and South American culture would make sense. And I always argue, in Arizona and the West Coast, there was always an interest towards artists of Cuban descent. And it it's really about understanding, or placing it in a larger context. So I think for the visitor at PAM, um, it challenges them to think, okay, what does this do? What does this have to do with me? How does it change who I am? How does it relate to my experience? Obviously, the borders exist everywhere, and it's really just about making that more visible. And I think that this exhibition does that. And I have to say that I have, you know, I've gotten nothing but enthusiasm and interest for bringing this show to Miami. And so,
Yeah, and I think one of the important thing is, like, we have this, we have, so the understanding often of people about what is Latinx or Chicanx is very homogeneous, yeah? Is one thing. And then, so when you see, let's say, the Latinx people from that originate more from the Caribbean and South America that live in Miami, they find themselves identifying, most likely, as you're saying, with the Chicanx art that is being produced in the Southwest or in California, in El Paso, Los Angeles. So I think also the interesting thing is that it's not only about identifying with that, but also finding in your own singularity a possible dialogue. So here I am as a Latina, well, I'm an example, I guess, a Latina that originally is from Venezuela, identifying with Chicano art. I'm still myself, I'm never going to pretend, but there is this possibility, because I feel that that's what does, when you have an exhibition of voices that are very diverse, you can be diverse, unique, and at the same time part of a whole, part of a larger conversation. So it's singular and it's communal. And I think this is something that Marissa has discussed a lot in relation to the idea of the brown body. You know, and I don't know if you want to talk about that, you know, because it's a concept that embodies this.
so the well,
The brown
we're talking about the
commons.
brown
Sorry, the brown commons.
which is a great,
Yeah.
no, but it's such a beautiful idea, and I think it's important. So let's highlight that.
Yeah. So Brown Commons, coined by Jose Esteban Munoz, pivotal scholar and writer who left us too early as well. But the concept of brownness being a connector, you know, amongst communities who are often, as I think this exhibition highlights, overlooked, unseen, and not just in the way that brownness is treated within this whiteness, especially of the US, but just about how there is this connector amongst individuals who are seen as othered. It's the concept of, you not being white, you existing outside of that mainframe. And the brownness is the link, so when you see another brown person, you're like, I feel safe. You kind of approach it like, this is probably a safe space for me, a safer space. And how brownness too is just, it's not just like in terms of skin color, but it's also just in terms of being other in different ways. So I think, being a foreigner, like an immigrant, those concepts too of like, you may not look brown, but you have these other forms of otherness. You've gone through this journey, and so have others, and you can potentially relate. So I think that is why it makes so much sense. It's here in Miami, and it connects with so many people, because there are a lot of communities I think can relate to, the topics and issues that a lot of the artists are discussing, from like Irena de Cervantes, issues within school bullying, because seen as too dark, brown, other, but also, who's another good example? Maria Gaspar, and where she tries to camouflage her body within the landscape, and like that concept of like code switching. So I think that is another pivotal part of the exhibition, that why it makes it's very singular and individualistic, but also very universal and common and collectivizing, in that sense of bringing people together to relate to so many subjects.
And also it's about a collectivity, as you say, but at the same time you can still be yourself. You can still be singular. So it's your one and your everybody too that comes with you. And I think that is a lovely concept for the exhibition. The fact that when you're there, also independently of who you are, I think this exhibition, because of course, I mean, we're talking about Latinx people, but we're talking also about all sorts of publics. You may be Black, you may be, someone that is just interested in art, and what does it do to you if you're not Latinx, if you're not a brown person, if you're not a queer person? I don't think the art in the exhibition is going to be alienating to people, but also, if you're interested in contemporary art, why would you not look at this art? Right. Just departing from that, and then go into what the art does. It talks about this particular issue, it talks about border issue, it talks about queerness, it talks about community, it talks about beauty, it talks about all these things, and there is just like, I think, is an expression of humanity, which is powerful. So whatever you are in the spectrum of who is your community and what are your artistic interests, if you're interested in contemporary art, if you're interested in what is the US today, Chicanx art, in your essay, Marissa, you talk about how Chicanx art is everywhere in the US. Is in Miami too. I'm sure we will meet some Chicanos on the day of the opening, because that is the thing. We think that something is segmented and relegated to this, because we have this idea that is old-fashioned and it's just like it's a fossil of reality, and it continues to perpetuate over time. No, just shake it up.